There is an unwritten rule in dictatorships. Fear is the currency of control. As long as the people fear the government more than they fear hunger, the regime stays. But the moment that balance shifts, the moment people fear hunger and a hopeless future more than they fear a bullet, the regime is finished. Welcome back. Look closely at the events unfolding in Iran right now. You might have seen the viral images women standing on cars, burning headscarves, and most shockingly, lighting cigarettes with the burning photograph of the Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei. To the untrained eye, this looks like another protest. We saw it in 2009 with the Green Movement, we saw it in 2019, we saw it in 2022 after the tragic death of Mahsa Amini. But I am here to tell you that this time it is different. This is not just a protest for social freedom, this is a desperate scream for survival. The Iranian government has responded with its ultimate weapon, the threat of death. The Attorney General has labeled protesters as enemies of God, a charge that carries a mandatory death sentence. Yet, despite the threat of public execution, the streets of Tehran, Isfahan and Mashhad are full. Why? Why would a rational human being walk towards a firing squad? The answer lies not in the Quran or the Constitution, but in the collapse of the Iranian Rial. Today we are going to decode the 2026 Iran crisis. We will look beyond the Western headlines. We will analyze the economic collapse, the looming shadow of the United States, the internal power struggle, and most importantly, what this chaos means for us in India. Is this the end of the Islamic Republic? Let's find out. To understand the gravity of the situation, you have to understand the Iranian judicial system. When the state calls you a political dissident, you go to jail. But when the state calls you Muharabe, an enemy of God, they are justifying your elimination on religious grounds. This terminology is not accidental, it is designed to terrify. The regime is signaling that they are ready to replicate the mass executions of the 1980s if necessary. But here is the failure of that strategy. Terror only works when people feel they have a life worth preserving. For decades, there was an unspoken social contract in Iran. The people tolerated the strict Islamic rules and the lack of political freedom, and in exchange, the government provided subsidies, cheap oil, cheap bread, cheap electricity, and a stable, albeit restricted life. That contract is now shredded. The demographics of Iran are working against the mullahs. The generation born after the 1979 revolution, the youth, is educated, connected to the world via now-blocked internet and completely disillusioned. They do not remember the glory of the revolution, they only know the misery of the sanctions. When a woman burns the photo of the Supreme Leader, she is not just insulting a man, she is rejecting the entire ideology that has governed the nation for 47 years. The government's reaction, shutting down the internet, deploying the Basij militia, and threatening executions is a sign of weakness, not strength. A confident government engages, a terrified government shoots. But bullets cost money, and paying the soldiers who shoot those bullets requires a functioning economy, and that is where the real story begins. Let's talk numbers, because numbers don't lie. If I told you tomorrow the 100 rupee note in your pocket would be worth only 10 rupees, how would you react? Panic, right? Now imagine it happens every year for a decade. The Iranian currency, the rial, has suffered one of the most catastrophic collapses in modern history. As of early 2026, the exchange rate has hit a psychological breaking point. $1 is trading for approximately 1.4 million Iranian rials. Let that sink in. 1.4 million. This hyperinflation has devastated the Iranian middle class. The inflation rate is hovering officially around 42%, but independent economists suggest the real number for food items is closer to 70% or 80%. Last year alone, food prices jumped 72%. Imagine buying milk, eggs and bread and imagine the price doubling every few months. Reports indicate that 30% of the Iranian population has fallen into absolute poverty. This is not relative poverty where you can't afford a new car. This is absolute poverty where you cannot afford enough calories to survive the day. Meanwhile, inequality is stark. It is estimated that a tiny elite, roughly 1% of the population, mostly connected to the IRGC and the religious establishment, controls one-third of the nation's wealth. They drive imported luxury cars in North Tehran, while the rest of the country scrounges for subsidized bread. This is why I said earlier that this protest is different. The 2022 protests were about the hijab and dignity. The 2026 protests are about bread and survival. Revolutions triggered by ideology can be suppressed. Revolutions triggered by hunger are almost impossible to stop. Now let's zoom out. Iran does not exist in a vacuum. It is the arch-enemy of the West in the Middle East, and naturally, when your enemy is drowning, you don't throw them a rope, you throw them an anchor. The United States and Israel are watching these developments with extreme interest. Donald Trump has made his stance clear-cut. His recent statements, claiming the US is locked and loaded and promising to rescue protesters, are significant. Why? Because the West sees a golden opportunity. For years, the US and Israel have tried to contain Iran's nuclear program and its regional influence through sanctions and cyber attacks. But an internal collapse, that's the dream scenario. Regime change from within is cheaper and cleaner than a war. There is a theory circulating in intelligence circles that we might be seeing a coordinated effort. The timing of the economic pressure combined with external messaging suggests that the West is trying to push the Iranian population over the edge. However, this is a dangerous game. The US has promised support, but history tells us to be cautious. In 2009, during the Green Movement, the Obama administration hesitated and the movement was crushed. In 2011, in Syria, the West encouraged an uprising that turned into a decade-long civil war. If the US intervenes, perhaps by providing satellite internet like Starlink or by funding opposition groups, the Iranian regime will accuse the protesters of being foreign agents. This gives the government the excuse they need to use military-grade weapons on their own people. We are looking at a potential Syria-like situation, but in a country that is much larger, much more armed and critically important to global energy. We cannot ignore the elephant in the room. Ayatollah Khamenei is old. He is in his 80s. The question of who comes next is tearing the regime apart from the inside. There are rumors of a power struggle. On one side, you have the hardliners who support Mujtaba Khamenei, the Supreme Leader's son. On the other side, there are factions within the military and the clergy who believe a hereditary succession would betray the principles of the 1979 revolution. This internal weakness makes the current protests even more dangerous for the regime. If the elite are busy fighting each other for the throne, they might be too slow to react to the streets. Furthermore, the IRGC, the Revolutionary Guards, are the true power brokers. They control the guns and a massive chunk of the economy. If the protests get too large, will the IRGC continue to protect the clergy? Or will they decide that the mullahs are a liability and stage a military coup to save themselves? We might see a transition from a theocracy ruled by priests to a military dictatorship. Neither option spells freedom for the Iranian people, but a split in the leadership could lead to a bloody civil war. Now I know what some of you are thinking. This is tragic, but why should I care in India? Here is the reality. We cannot ignore Iran. Geography is destiny. Number 1. The oil shock. Despite sanctions, Iran is a major player in the energy market. But more importantly, Iran controls the Strait of Hormuz. This is a narrow passage through which a massive percentage of the world's oil passes. If the Iranian regime feels it is about to collapse, they have threatened to invoke the Samson option, to bring the temple down with them. They could mine the strait or attack tankers. If that happens, crude oil prices could shoot up to $150 or $200 a barrel. For India, which imports over 80% of its oil, this would be catastrophic. Petrol prices would skyrocket, increasing the cost of transport, vegetables, and everyday goods. Your EMI rates could go up as inflation rises. Number 2, the Chabahar port. India has invested millions in the Chabahar port in Iran. It is our gateway to Central Asia and Afghanistan, bypassing Pakistan. If Iran descends into civil war or chaos, that strategic asset is frozen. Our trade routes to Russia and Europe via the North-South transport corridor would be blocked. Number 3, the diaspora and regional stability. There are thousands of Indians living in the region. Instability in Iran often spills over into Iraq, Syria, and Lebanon. A wider Middle East conflict puts our diaspora at risk and forces India to walk a diplomatic tightrope between our friendship with Israel and the US and our strategic needs with Iran. India wants a stable Iran. Whether that is a democratic Iran or the current regime, New Delhi prefers stability over chaos. A civil war next door is never good news. So how does this end? We are looking at 3 scenarios. The crackdown. The regime uses brutal force, kills thousands, and silences the movement for another few years. This is the most likely immediate outcome, but it only delays the inevitable explosion. The civil war. The military fractures and Iran becomes a battleground, destabilizing the entire world. Or the revolution. The sheer weight of the economic collapse forces the regime to crumble, leading to a new, uncertain future for Iran. The bravery of the Iranian women and men is undeniable. They are fighting not just for the right to wear what they want, but for the right to eat, live, and dream. The coming weeks will be historic. The photo of the burning Supreme Leader is not just a picture, it is a prophecy. The fire has been lit. The only question is, what will burn down first, the dictatorship or the country? I want to hear from you. Do you think the US should intervene, or will that make things worse? And how do you think India should navigate this crisis? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Stay curious, stay informed. I will see you in the next one.